Welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast, where we teach you everything you need to land your first job as a software developer by developing yourself, your skills, your network, your habits, and more. Today, our guest is Louie Bacaj. Louie has over a decade of experience as a software developer. He joined Jet.com when it had less than 20 engineers, and he stayed through its acquisition by Walmart and eventually rose to become Director of Engineering for all of Walmart Pharmacy. In this episode, we talk about Louie's journey as a developer, what he learned from Jet.com's founder, Mark Louie, how he built a Twitter audience, and why he quit his job despite being slated to earn $1 million in compensation this year. I think you're really going to enjoy this one, so without further ado, here is my conversation with Louie Bacaj. All right, Louie Bacaj, welcome to the Develop Yourself podcast.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk today. Just by means of starting off, I was wondering if you could introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you and your story.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Louie. Basically, I'm an immigrant. I was born in communism. I was brought over at 10 years old to the U.S., where I grew up in the Bronx, New York City. Put myself through school. I graduated from computer science and finally ended up getting a job as a software engineer. It was and within a decade, I basically was able to get my entire family sort of out of poverty. I convinced my brother to become a software engineer. I convinced everybody to become a software engineer because I saw the money was headed there, and they all sort of jumped on board. And so, yeah, we're all sort of out of poverty. And very, very recently, with the pandemic, I made a big decision to kind of leave that career behind and to try to chase my dreams of entrepreneurship. It wasn't an easy decision because I sort of come from poverty and I was making a lot of money. And and basically everyone around me is like, you're crazy. Why would you quit this amazing job where you're running a bunch of engineering teams to basically make nothing? But, but I mean, you got to take a chance once in a while. And so that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, super interesting. And I think we'll get into a lot of that because I think most people, if they heard, you grew up in poverty, then you were rose to become very senior, making all this money. Why would you leave that behind? So definitely want to dig into that. But before we get there, I'm wondering if you could maybe start a little bit towards the beginning of your career, specifically kind of what you had been doing up until you worked at Jet, and why you decided to make the move to a startup from where you had been.
That's a great question. And I actually don't talk that much about that part, but I think it's a really important part for people getting started. My first job as a software engineer, basically, I think the first offer was like 45 grand or something, and it was at the time, they didn't. Juniors now are making well over 100 grand. I mean, in most good places, at least in the U.S. And so it was, at the time it was this kind of difficult. I actually had to work nights, which is really strange to be working nights as a software engineer. But the company made supply chain logistics software, and so I was in these warehouses at night, making sure that the Java code wasn't going down, which was run on-prem on these servers. And after like 9 months of every other day or whatever, working from like 12 a.m. to 5 a.m., I decided, you know what, I gotta get another job. And I had some experience, by that time in Java, and I had the degree. And I managed to get a job for a company that made market and credit risk software. And basically, very, very quickly, I sort of really loved the team. Even if I didn't necessarily love the domain, I loved the people there. They were all very ambitious people, and and it was a big step up in terms of salary for me. And I got promoted there several times. I really was kind of enjoying myself. And in that process, I also started a family. I got married. I had a kid on the way, and I was kind of thinking, I should try to chase a little bit more money. And it looked like one way to make more money was to join the big banks.
Sure.
And that's what I did. I went and I joined Bank of America Merrill Lynch, and they were paying me much better than SunGard. I mean, almost twice as much. And it was cool at first, but then I realized very quickly how much I hated that job. And it's not like there's nothing wrong with Bank of America, of course, but I landed on a team and I was unhappy and the money was good, but like you can't be somewhere for just the money. And that's when I started like questioning things, and I said, you know um, what I love most is learning and growing. And if I could do that, even if it means a little bit less money, I should just do that. And so that's where I started having these thoughts like maybe I'm going to grow a lot faster, maybe I'm going to learn a lot more at a startup. And so I made the decision to eventually leave the bank and join Jet. But I can't, it was yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the context. I definitely want to talk about Jet because to me, Jet is super interesting. And having heard Mark Laurie on how I built this, for example,
Nice.
also sounds like an interesting guy. And I know he was your boss, I think. So definitely want to touch on that. I'm curious before we get there, though. So you mentioned your first job is kind of not ideal in a lot of ways, right? They weren't paying you that much. You were working nights. And a lot of our audience are people more towards the beginning of their careers,
Sure.
maybe looking at taking that first job. I
Yeah.
always tell people that the first job is the hardest to get.
Yep.
And also that you can't really afford to be terribly picky because you haven't been validated in the workforce yet. You kind of represent risk. But I'm curious, I guess number one, what did you do to grow in that first job, despite all of the perceived negatives of the job? And what advice would you give people as far as what to look for in a first job and maybe an ideal scenario?
I think basically the way that our industry has kind of evolved over time, there's still plenty of bad places you could land in, but the money's much better. But I would still say like that could also be kind of a detractor because you're hearing all these stories about people landing 150K junior out of college, and you're like, oh, I only landed 80 or 90. I mean, and that's all I could land. I mean, I think I say get your foot in the door, right? Get some
Hmm.
experience by any means, because once you have some real world experience, you've worked on a real team. You know, so many other doors will open up for you within I'd say within a year of experience. Other doors start to, and that's what happened to me. I mean, and so that first role was very difficult. I was on a decent team. The code base was all in Java. Like I said, they made warehouse management systems, which is kind of interesting, but not terribly interesting. And what was really challenging is that it had a lot of bugs, and so it would crash. Services would crash in the middle of the night, and they didn't have a good process for dealing with those kinds of things. And later on in my career, I learned all of these really good approaches to dealing with bugs and dealing with defects and not burning people out. And that's what that's basically what was happening. Is like a lot of the people in the team were getting burnt out, which is a big reason why I kind of left. But like even with all of that, I'm grateful with this crappy 45K a year, crappy now by today's standards. Back then, it was like, you know what? It's my foot in the door. I don't really care. So even with that, I'm really grateful that I had the opportunity. Well, I want to learn and be on a real team and grow. And so I think like if people can land a job, any job in our industry where they're gaining experience, I mean, it's going to be valuable. And then like I said, within basically 9 months, I was already out of there into a much better place where I really grew like crazy. I mean, they gave me ownership and they let me run with things, and they let me make mistakes and they let me recover from those mistakes and all these different things that, were, sort of incredibly stressful at the first role, became fun at the second role. And so even though even the second role wasn't necessarily paying market rate, just but that's okay because I grew like crazy there. So I wasn't, basically at SunGuard was the name of the company that made the marketing credit risk software.
Hmm.
And yeah, I grew like crazy there. So my point is like take the growth, get your foot in the door, and then you can worry about the money. You can worry about making the trade-offs, because all it is a set of trade-offs that you're going to make about your career over a certain amount of time.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Definitely getting the foot in the door is key, I'd say. So that's really good stuff. I'm curious, something you mentioned that it might be fun to drill down on, that the same things that were stressful in the first job were fun in the second. I'm curious what you attribute that to. Is it company culture or something else that changed? What was the deal there?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question. I think there's a couple of things, and this is kind of a really important thing that I like to tell people is like being in these big companies, and SunGard was a big company. I mean, I think they had like 20,000 employees, and it was a tech company, so most of the employees were tech related, and so it's for a tech company, it was like medium to large size, not as big as Walmart, obviously, or
Hmm.
Bank of America, but basically, these big companies are kind of like countries in a lot of ways, right? Like it's like a weird thing, right? Like if you like. We live in America, but I grew up in the Bronx, and the Bronx was like rough, man. Like and I was a geek, especially earlier on. And so, you go through it, it makes you tougher. But the point is, that's the same. This is America's the same place where you got like some beautiful areas, right? And so,
Right.
all of these companies are the same way. And so, I'd say the biggest difference for me was like at SunGard, I basically ended up on this amazing team. I had this great manager who became a mentor and friend to me, and then also my teammates, kind of exuded that, and also I sort of found like a technical mentor. The guy used to sit next to me. He had like a decade of experience, would answer any questions I had, and that just that just made the whole experience so much better. Even though like it was rough, we were building this market and credit risk software for the big banks, and it was complex software. I mean, there was still bugs in it because whenever you're building really complex stuff, I mean, there's going to be some thing you didn't understand that you put in the code that the business people are like, this shouldn't work this way. And so anyway, but that didn't matter. Like those things were so much more tolerable because of the group and the team. And so I kind of landed in this good spot. Now I'm sure there were probably teams in SunGard that maybe weren't as much fun as the team I was on. And so I tried to stay there as long as I could, basically. But eventually the money kind of became an issue, and I
Right.
ended up chasing greener pastures. And then I landed on a bad team, which is kind of how I know that, like, I'm sure even at Bank of America there's some amazing teams. And if you happen to land on a bad one, like and you have a bad manager or whatever, tough luck, basically. Um, so yeah, I don't know if that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think what I'm hearing is that essentially the culture of the team and the support of the team that you ended up on made a huge difference. Which is a great point as well about switching. I think it's very tempting to switch and have that grass is greener kind of syndrome, but interesting to hear from your perspective that
Of course.
it doesn't always work out. So um, I think that's also another interesting thing, just having gone through your course and seeing kind of what you write about. You seem to be more on the end of staying where you are and building kind of relational equity in your current company. So I'm wondering if you might be willing to touch on that for a few minutes without spoiling your course.
Yeah, no, I don't mind spoiling the course. I mean, a lot of what I write about on Twitter and all these places are basically things related to that in some way. But the point is, I think you know I've gone back and forth on this, right? But I think if you happen to land in a good place and you're making good money and you're growing really fast, it's really difficult to make this. For me, at least, it's difficult to justify a move for like a 10% increase, where now you're going to have to build up all of those relationships again. People have to know what you're capable of again. All these other things, and so I'm saying this, of course, but I changed jobs a bunch of times early in my career. Basically, pretty much every like 3 years, I was kind of moving around. And when I landed at Jet, yes, Jet got acquired by Walmart, so technically I was working with the same group of people, even when I was in Walmart pharmacy. But my point is that I built all these relationships, and people knew that, okay, Louie gets shit done, or
Right.
whatever it is, and that followed me around in there. And so if I would have gone somewhere new, one, I would have risked landing on a bad team. And what if that happens? Then what? Then I got to leave again, or just put up with the pain. And I knew about bad teams because I sort of saw that early in my career. And so I think if you end up in a good place, basically, and you're growing, it's foolish to leave for 10%. Now, if you're going to get a 50% raise, it's almost worth the risk, right? Like,
Right.
or even because you're vastly, number one, you're completely underpaid, which is really bad. So that means that the place that you're at doesn't actually care about you. If they're willing to underpay you by 50% or 75, you have to leave at that point.
Right.
And I think that's a very different thing. So I'm not saying that basically. I am saying like that's worth the risk. And if you find out that the new role with the 50% raise, like it was for me at Bank of America, is you know a bad role, you could always take like a 5% pay cut and join a startup or join some other place. But it's worth the risk at that point. I mean, that's what my gut says from experience. But I don't know. People have different opinions on this. Like some people believe in jumping around to keep getting raises. I just think that long term, if you're trying to build a career long term, it's almost always going to backfire at some point because people are going to realize like you're way too high level for what you bring to the table, and you're going to end up finding new jobs all the time, and that's stressful in of itself.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely a fine balance. And you mentioned right then that you can potentially, if you're switching too much, you can outpace your own growth in terms of title and stuff, which is very interesting. I think it's a real concern that not that many people bring up. But then you're at a company where you hire someone that's supposed to be very senior, and it turns out they're not. So I think that's a good point. I think it's also a good point to maybe give a little bit more weight to the relationships and the reputation you've built
Mm.
internally at a company and try to value that as well as a salary. Like you said, 10% is maybe not worth sacrificing all of the relational capital you've built up. So I think that's a really refreshing perspective. On that note, you stayed at Jet for a long time. It looks like kind of you did some switching around and then you joined Jet. For those that aren't familiar, Jet.com, it was essentially if I'm correct, an Amazon competitor, just in
Exactly,
the
an e-commerce
e-commerce
startup. Yep.
space.
Yep.
Yeah. And so you stayed there for a long time. I'm curious about a few things. I guess, had you already kind of developed some of this thinking around relational capital at Jet, or was it more that it was fast paced, you were learning a lot, so you decided to stay? What kept you there so long, basically, is the question.
I mean, I think just the fact that the people I felt like I was learning like crazy from the people around me. They were all incredibly smart people. Um, you know, some of them had gone to wonderful schools, had worked at FANG startups. My boss and mentor ran like all of storage at Google. And all these people were incredible human beings. And I sort of felt like I don't even know why they hired me at first. But it was very clear within like a couple of months. I mean, I was working hard. I was putting in the hours. I was doing whatever it took to basically show these people that like they didn't make a mistake in hiring me. And lo and behold, within 6 months, they were promoting me, and I was building a team. And so it just felt like I'm working with all these amazing people that I have a ton of respect for, and at the same time, I'm growing. I'm sort of on this what felt like the fast lane for me at the time, and the company was moving. I mean, like a rocket. I mean, it was like basically, when I joined, it was under 20 sort of engineers in the whole thing, and by the time Walmart acquired us, it was like 350 engineers, and it was basically 3,500 people working for the company entirely. It was massive. I saw that whole thing happen. I got to hire a lot of those people, and so it just felt to me like it's a constant like more and more growth and more learning. And like for like 6 months, you're working at this kind of pace, at this kind of level, and then suddenly the company doubles, and so now you're like in an entirely different place. Like, can you keep up? Can you learn all these new things now? And for me, I mean, I went from like I said, I went from an individual contributor, senior engineer, to managing a team within 6 months, and then after that, I had to grow the team, grow it to 3 teams. Then, by the time Walmart acquired us, I was running Walmart's pharmacy, which is like, I mean, at least the modern technology for their pharmacy. And basically, it's like a $35 billion business for Walmart, 100 million customers, and we had a bunch of engineering teams building all the modern stuff for that during COVID. And so it was just like insane growth. I mean, I would be crazy to drop that unless it's for some vastly other some totally different reason, like basically like if I want to quit to chase my dreams of entrepreneurship, but
Right.
to leave it for another company when you've built up all that credibility, you've shown all this growth. I mean, to me it felt like um it's a huge risk to try to find better at that point. Basically, I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, definitely. I think there's definitely situations where it just things get very good. Sounds like that's what happened to you. I think people that are more in our crowd, I think, tend to fear that a little bit. because of the whole golden handcuff situation. So we'll
Sure.
definitely talk about that. I'm curious, I guess you mentioned Mark Laurie. So did you report directly to him
No,
or?
I didn't report directly to Mark. I mean, when I first joined, I was a senior engineer. I reported to the CTO, this guy Mike Hannaran, who's a great guy. He's also a mentor. We still keep in touch all the time. He hired an EVP of engineering under him to kind of come in and bring stability and bring like a different skill set. And that was the guy that ran all of Google Storage. And I joined as a senior engineer, and by the time Walmart acquired us, I was a senior director running basically personalization and all of these different, all the ad tech for the site. And we built many different tools and things to kind of help the company grow. But I was in the room where they were vetting us to acquire us. I was, so I went from, I was in the room with Mark Lord. I didn't report directly to him, but like, you got to understand, I joined as an IC, senior engineer to get to that point. I mean, I felt proud, and yeah. But I do know Mark. I mean, he's a great guy, and he's invested in a lot of different things, and he's a visionary. I mean, the guy goes after like insanely big things that most of us would never even consider.
Right. Yeah, I think being around those kinds of people is special. I'm curious if you have maybe one or two things you learned from Mark or the other senior leadership at Jet. Because, like you said, these are very, high achieving people, came from great backgrounds. I'm curious what you've taken away from that experience.
I mean, I've learned so much from them, like, just through osmosis, right? Like just watching them do their thing, just watching them run this, what was basically a tiny company up to a massive organization. And so a lot of my principles that I run, not to brag or anything, but this is probably the thing that I'm most proud of is like, even after Walmart acquired us, my teams were like fully intact. All of our people stuck around. And we had some of the highest engagement scores in all of Walmart Global Tech, which is, not an easy thing to do. To have that retention rate in this kind of environment and to have that kind of engagement means that we were doing something right. But I got to be honest, like I didn't, I joined as a senior engineer. Most of the leadership stuff that I got great at was basically picked up from these people. And running my team with principles, like I basically, the very foundation, the core of our teams, we ran it with this radical transparency. We ran it, we were incredibly fair to the point where like and trust was another one of our sort of core values. And that's, Mark always talks about that stuff. Like that stuff is so, like, if you have that stuff in a team, then just all these other things just take care of themselves. And as an example, like when we hired juniors, right? And this whole idea of fairness, like if we made an offer to an individual at, let's say, software engineer 2, and someone else came in but did much better, on the interview process, but they had the same amount of experience, like maybe 1 year of experience right out of college, 1 year of experience. One person did amazing, and one person didn't do so great. We like both of them. We want to hire both of them. We would always make the same offer regardless of how much better someone did on the interview process. Now that's a little controversial, but we believe in fairness. That's how we run our team. So when just because you had a little bit of a better whiteboard session, I mean, your experience is your experience. And so, that's for sure controversial, but we ran it with those things. And I didn't, like I said, I didn't learn that myself. I picked it up from these people, and I saw that it worked. And I saw that like every time I violated my own principles, and like, it was a disaster basically. And so like all these different things that I ended up applying to my leadership style ended up saving us, and ended up creating this wonderful team that we had. And we had these great interpersonal relationships, and people, fought hard for each other and helped each other grow. And it's a very different kind of environment, I think, than a lot of other places in big tech, where it's kind of like a dog eat dog world. We've very much viewed it as like, we're going to keep growing this pie, and as part of that, I mean, everyone has a different slice of the pie, but everybody's slice is growing. Like no matter what happens, everybody's going to grow. You're going to become a senior engineer. Maybe you want to become a tech lead. We're going to make more teams. We're going to keep growing. So it's all these things. I mean, that's Mark Lohr's mindset, is just to keep, going bigger and bigger. And so, yeah, I would say I picked up a lot of things, mostly from watching them. I think, when you're in a startup, people don't necessarily have time to sit down with you and tell you, this is how you should do it. But you don't need that, because you're seeing them make tough calls. You're seeing them like decide something huge in a matter of minutes. You're watching it in real time, and that stuff is like so much more valuable even than them sitting down and like trying to explain it to you. I feel.
Yeah, totally. I think, transparency, trust, and fairness, like you said, are huge, make a really big difference anywhere you are. So interesting to hear how you pick those up from them. I'm curious as well. One thing you've mentioned, and I don't know if maybe you developed this thinking at Jet or before, but engineering, the thought of engineering being a partner with business and product and having an equal seat at the table and not just being, machines that pull a task off the Jira backlog, but really engaging in that way. I'm curious if you could tell a little bit about how your thinking around that developed and how you got good at it and how you might suggest other people do it.
Yes. Okay. So basically, um, contrasting my old roles to this new role of leading people, I saw everything that went wrong in all the other places that I was a part of, and it's just this whole idea of like we're gonna throw things. I mean, so as an example, at Bank of America, the engineering team. We were all in New York City. The engineering team was in a different building than the product and business team, like literally like 40 blocks away. Now, why would you ever structure that way? Like it makes no sense, right? Like why are we even going to an office then if you and I are not going to like? We should just be remote at that point. Like, and we shouldn't even, But that's the kind of setup they had. And why did they have that? They had that because they viewed engineering as like, I'm going to throw this over a wall. They're going to go build it, and then they're going to give me back the finished thing, and that's it. That's our interaction with them, and that's just a terrible, terrible way to interact. And so what I witnessed at Jet is like me and my teams, we sat right next to our marketing partners, and they would use the tools that that we built right next to us. And when there was a bug, we'd see them like struggle, we'd see them like complain, we'd see them like, oh man, this thing sucks. And you'd hear that, and as a developer, you'd be like, all right, I'm going to fix it right now, And so the point is like you felt that pain. You were right there, and so to me, witnessing what they were doing wrong and just seeing like how much benefit there is to working really, really being tightly coupled with these people. And then even when we moved remote, we basically had that same mindset. It's like, let's have regular one-on-ones with the business people. Let's just chat with them, right? Like, which is strange. Like, I never talked to anybody on the business side at Bank of America. Like, they had some product or project manager in between us. And, I maybe met them once or twice at like a team gathering, and it's insane, right? Like because we're building software for them that they're going to use, and somehow we work in the same company, but they're treating us like I don't know, like we're foreigners or something. Like we're not even in the same. We don't have the same mindset. We're not humans even, and so it just felt terrible basically. And so my goal became to do the opposite of that, and to like push my people, push them. I mean, so, because engineers, like even me myself, I'm sort of awkward and introverted, and sometimes like I can go off on a tangent. And it's like all engineers kind of have their own quirks, and we wouldn't be engineers if we didn't have something different about us. And I think that's a good thing. And so the point is I push people, just like I had to push myself, because I never wanted us to be in that environment that I witnessed at these other places, and it helped us immensely. I mean, everybody on the team became so much better at the business problem, at the domain, and eventually added massive business value. And all of these people, I mean, everyone moved up. They moved up. Why? Because it's like when you go and you want to get somebody promoted as a leader, you go, what do you have to brandish? You have to show that they added value. They made an impact. So they knew the kind of business value they were adding because they were talking to the business people, and they would come back to me and say, this feature that we pushed out this week, 20% uptick in conversion. And I'm writing that down. When I go talk to my leaders and say I want to promote so and so, that's one of the first things I'm bringing up. So these kinds of things, are incredibly valuable. But most people in engineering kind of like it seems unimportant.
Right.
It's not unimportant. I mean, it's like it's the whole thing. It's what you're there to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to the extent that more engineers can embrace that mindset, it's going to be better for them and for their organizations as well. Kind of like you said, it's like you're not there to write code, you're there to generate value. And a lot of times that's made easier when you're making your coworkers' lives better who work in different aspects of the business. So I think it's a really powerful mindset. I think to the extent that more people can adopt it, they're going to see the kind of growth that you've seen, or at least some of it. I think that's really the kind of person that you want to end up promoting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. So let's pivot a little bit to now. I'm a little bit more familiar with what you're up to these days because you and I are both part of Daniel Vassallo's Small Bets course and community, and that's how I became familiar with you.
It's an awesome community, man. I keep everyone I've met in there, people like you, obviously, incredibly high caliber human beings, and so I'm very glad that it's there's so much serendipity to it. I'm very glad that I landed on it.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one of the benefits is that doing something like you and I are both doing, it's easy to feel a little bit crazy when speaking with friends or family. A lot of people won't get it. And so just having a community of people online that do get it is really helpful for me. I'm curious, kind of framing things in terms of what you've done. So you had this tremendous growth at Jet. You moved up, you went through the acquisition by Walmart. You were running the tech for all of Walmart Pharmacy, and then you decided to leave. You left, I think you said $1 million was coming down the pipe in terms of compensation last year, and you walked away from it. I'm curious, why is that? And if you could explain a little bit of your thought process, especially as a person coming from poverty, like you said, I think there could potentially be a temptation to just stay still, right? And now that things are so good. So I'd love to know your thoughts on the whole backstory there.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think everyone around you, when you come from poverty, everyone around you has that mindset, right? Which is like, hey, once you get to a good spot, just hang tight, even if maybe you feel like you know I don't know. Regardless of how you feel, you should just hang tight. That's the mindset. My mom tells me that all the time. She's like, "Don't you regret quitting your job? It's like you're not making any money." And so it's like everyone. I mean, and I love my mother, right? But I'm just saying, like everyone around you has that, and so you have to deal with that, which is not easy. And having friends like you and other people in the community has definitely helped with that. But basically, I made that decision for a few reasons. I mean, earlier last year, I kind of started putting myself out there a little bit more. I started engaging on Twitter. I started writing articles regularly. I took a couple of cohort-based courses, of which Small Bets is one of them. And in that process, of writing and just putting my thoughts down and going on these walks and thinking, I started thinking, like, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, I'm basically working. Yes, I'm managing these teams, but I'm on 50 hours of Zoom calls a week minimum. And basically, most of those Zoom calls, I'm just sitting there not saying anything for 50 minutes. And then for 2 minutes, someone will ask me a question. And I'm in this middle management role where basically like I'm too high up to see what's going on the ground, but I'm not high enough to set the strategy. And so I'm in this middle management role and they're paying me very good to be in that role and basically just manage these people and do all that. But I'm on this call and people are like, "What do you think, Louie?" And it's like, that's the only question in the whole 55. And I'm like, I don't know. It sounds good. Let's do it, And
Right.
the point is, I felt like I'm meant for more than that. I'm meant for more than just sitting on these damn Zoom calls. And so that was marinating in my head. I started writing online around February, March, and I wrote tons of essays about different topics, like exploring my mindset, exploring different things, exploring different ways I could help people. And eventually, around September, I decided to kind of pull the trigger and quit. And at first, I thought, I was just gonna just do the traditional startup route, which is my brother and I. We both quit at the same time. I convinced him too, by the way. I convinced him to join tech. He also was at Jet. He was on the search on the search engineering team, different team than mine for e-commerce. And he was a staff engineer there, and basically he too decided to quit and just let's try to start something up together. We can build things, and so anyway, at first our mindset was like we're just going to do that, right? But then we quickly realized, like, man, building a SaaS, and we partnered with these two other guys to do this, and we quickly realized like a SaaS is like it's a slow process. Like you build the feature set. Now you got to go talk to a lot of customers, and then you got to try to get them to sign up and pay you a lot of money. And so we built this household management software, which is still there, it's doing well. These guys are trying to sell more and more of it. And at the same time, but like my brother and I quit our jobs and we left this like insane salary $1 million, like you said. And so now we had to figure out, okay, we need to make money somehow. We need to make some decent money somehow. And so we started thinking, what are different things we could do? I through these courses, through these communities, I realized, wait, I can make money. I could make money selling my expertise. I mean, I could make money teaching people how to climb the ladder. I managed so many engineers. I witnessed so many different career paths and choices. So first thing I did is I decided to make a course to help people do that. And then very quickly I realized, like, okay, I should be placing more of these bets so that I can maximize my chances of remaining an entrepreneur. So I don't have to go back to big tech. And this has become my mindset now. It's just like, how do I place enough little bets? And I'm not looking with these little bets. I'm not looking to become wealthy. I mean, I just want to survive. And so I want to get to a place where I have enough things that are generating revenue, and basically I can survive, and I don't need to. And look, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with big tech. I mean, they treated me good. I made good money, and I'm not trying to. I'm just saying, from my personal, where I was at that point in time, I had saved up some money. I realized, like, is it worth it? Is another $1 million, that's coming up, gonna really change my life? And the truth is, like, it's not. I mean, it's not. I mean, I just need to be in a place where my family can eat well, and I can spend time with them, and all of that. And so I made that decision basically to quit right around September. But after I quit, I quickly realized, like, if we're going to survive, if I'm going to be able to live off of what I got, I need to generate some money. And so the best way to generate money seems to be try n number of things. The ones that work, keep them going. The ones that don't, kill them off. And so that's where I'm at, Peter.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of that resonates with me, obviously, given that I'm more or less doing something very similar. I'm curious, you mentioned small bets. So for those of the audience that aren't familiar, this is something that Daniel Vassallo talks about, who made the course that Louie and I did. Essentially, the idea is that you are not going all in on a SaaS, but you are placing bets, as Daniel calls them, with small inputs that are safe to fail. And the thinking is that you're spreading your risk and you're opening yourself up to more serendipity and to things working. So, Louie, I'm curious if you might describe some of your small bets that you have currently.
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, so I think, I mean, basically, I don't think Daniel's saying, like, you don't have to do software, but I think he's saying, like, if you're going to do software, you're going to want to do the kind of SaaS that you can do in like a month. Or like a few weeks. You're not going to want to spend 9 months building something and then find out it failed and now you're starving. And so I completely subscribe to that mindset. I mean, my initial mindset was like, I'm just going to, just keep banging my head against the wall and make that work. But obviously, thank God I ran into Daniel Vassallo and I learned these different ways of thinking. And so since then I've placed multiple bets. My brother and I had this side project that we kind of started building that we thought might be the thing, that we quit big tech for at first, which is this app called Tapex. And it's basically, you could record your desktop. It's similar to Loom, and you could upload it, and it kind of transcribes and also lets you kind of share your screen. And so it's very, very easy to use. And the only sort of difference between that and Loom is that you could also, it's native for Mac and Windows, where Loom is on the browser, and also and also it lets you draw on the screen. So a lot of teachers were kind of using it. Most of the people using that are using the free tier. So we've got like 7,000 or 8,000 people that use it, but they're all on the free. Teachers are very broke, apparently.
Yeah.
We didn't know this. So anyway, so they're and which is fine, right? Like, it doesn't cost us much to keep the free tier going and let them use the tool by itself and get like a local recording that they can do whatever with. The cloud stuff does cost a lot of money, so we charge for that basically. But not a lot of people are charging. But I mean, not a lot of people are paying. But you never know. Maybe down the road, maybe Loom will go out of business. If that happens, then we're the only game in town, or one of the few in town. But so that's one of the small bets. Another small bet is my timeless career advice for software engineers is basically people that are already software engineers that want to get ahead, want to go from junior to senior to staff, and what's the best way to do that in the fastest amount of time. And so I made that course, and basically just from viewing the careers of so many other people, I thought it was needed, because a lot of the stuff out there it's not really looking at software engineering careers from the human level. It's not really looking at from the interpersonal relationships, from the things that I feel are the stuff that gets you moved up. It's not, the tech skills get you in the door. Once you're in the door, you need a whole different skill set to get up there. And so I made that, and it's done very well. I mean, I made, more money from that than the software. I sold over 600 something copies, and I'm very proud of it. I'm very glad I did it, and I did it very quickly. I've added some modules to it over time based on feedback, and I'm probably going to add more to it as people, as I get similar questions, just add it, and the people that bought it can get that for free too. I don't really mind that. And again, I'm not trying to become rich with that course. The whole idea is it's out there. Every once in a while, it sells a little bit, and I make a little bit of money, and it's great. And I don't have to think about it. I'm not paying server costs. It's there. And then I also have another SaaS product that my brother and I sort of have been building, but it's been really hard because we're busy with a lot of stuff. Like this idea of small bets has thrown me around a little bit. Like I'm a mentor in a couple of cohort-based courses, and they pay me something for that. It's not a lot of money, but they pay me something. But really, it's the growth that I've been getting, and that's the reason why I do it. It's like basically mentoring other people. I found that even when I was an engineer, helping and mentoring other people helped level me up, and so it helped solidify my own knowledge. And so I basically, enjoy helping people put themselves out there online, help them get started with Twitter, get started with writing online. And so I joined these cohort-based courses that are like super popular, like Rite of Passage, and the Minimalist Entrepreneur, which Sahil Lavinia runs. I'm actually going to do a collaboration with Daniel Vassallo too on sort of real estate investing as a small bet to create kind of like a blue line income of just having some money coming in. And so, yeah, for me, the teaching is helping me kind of find other areas that I can make money from. And like I'm teaching these people, for very little money, but down the road, I might be able to productize that. Down the road, I might be able to turn that into a video course or a book. And so basically, we're working on one other sort of SaaS project, which is just this idea of writing Twitter threads and getting feedback on them. So it's kind of like Google Docs for Twitter threads. And the reason why I from doing all the online writing, I realized that feedback is one of the most impactful things that makes things go really far. Because when you write your stuff, someone you might think it's really good, but then someone else might be confused by it, and that just one little sentence change or one word change is the difference between having a tweet get seen by 100,000 people or just like 500 people. And so I feel that feedback has helped me immensely, and so I wanted to build a tool that lets people get feedback on their tweets before they publish them and schedule them. And so that's basically the next bet. It's done. It's just missing a couple of little features. But it's already in beta. People in the small bets community are already using it for feedback, which is really cool. And then I have one other small bet in the pipeline. It's a book on Microsoft Azure. It's mostly written. I've never gotten around to finishing it. I really want to finish it. I think it's going to be useful for people. It's basically like this, all the stuff that I learned working with Azure at Jet and building things that scale to millions of users and just basically helping people kind of get started with it. Someone that's never worked with the tech, and kind of similar to actually Daniel Vassallo's book on AWS. It's like, what are the best? There's so much technology you could use in there. What's the best stuff? And what's the stuff that's going to get me 95% of what I need? And so I have that book. Those are my bets. Sorry, very long-winded answer.
No, that's great. I love hearing about everything. And I believe you also have several rental properties, don't you?
Yeah. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. But yeah, so before I quit big tech, I actually went. I figured I had this hunch that like when I quit my job, it's going to be really hard to earn money. And so I bought a couple of rental properties. I mean, they're with mortgages, because like I said, I come from poverty. I mean, I was literally making like 20 grand a year back in 2010, and and by 2020. I posted all this stuff on Twitter, so I won't. But basically, I decided that I'm going to lever out my big tech salary, and that's one of the big advantages of having a nice W-2. W-2s basically suck because you get taxed like crazy. You get no write-offs. Right. But if you want to get a mortgage, they're gold. I mean, the banks will never turn you down. So you got to use that before you quit. And so
Yep.
my mindset was like, I kind of bought my first property was a 2-family. I lived on one side and I almost lived for free because the other side was basically paying the rent for me. I'm sorry, not the rent, the mortgage for me.
Yep.
And so I decided, this is actually like a really good model. Like I could just buy a couple of these, and even though I have a mortgage, I could still make money. I could still cash flow. And so I decided that I'm going to buy 2 more right before I quit. And basically, I just levered out. I went to the banks. I said, I make a ton of money. I'm good for it. Just loan me the money. And the bank loaned me the money. I went and I bought a 2-family home, and then I rented the whole thing. And I make like, maybe like $1,000 or $2,000 from it. But basically, I have a mortgage. I pay the mortgage and taxes, and then what's remaining is mine. And
Right.
but there's numerous advantages to that, which we could go into. But I'll just the short answer is it lets you get a lot of tax breaks even on other things that you're doing. And then in addition to it, every single month, even though you're only making $1,000 or $2,000, you're kind of paying down this debt. So
Right.
if you owe $1 million to the bank after 15 years, you owe zero. So you just made $1 million because someone else paid it for you. And it's this idea that, I mean, there's a little bit of overhead. You got to manage these things, but if you do it right, if you buy in good areas, it's a really hands off. Like you really do very little. I mean, like I would say I spend a couple hours a month max dealing with issues in these homes, and so I'm a huge fan. But I don't own that many where it becomes a burden and I can't do this other stuff. And the whole goal is to get to a place where we have to do very little and maximize the lifestyle. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's my goal now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a very interesting model, and one that I think a lot of people have heard of that are generally interested in financial independence, kind of the house hacking thing.
Yes.
But I've heard it applied a lot less to software engineers and specifically people that are trying to do what we're trying to do as a form of income, as kind of a small bet. So very interesting stuff. I think it's cool how you've kind of put this
So
portfolio
software
together.
engineers, I've noticed, Peter, they tend to stay away from atoms. They love bits. So you see them
Yeah.
investing in crypto, you see them investing in the markets, but like, I mean, that's all paper. That's all, they can always print more of that. They can always make more. Even the crypto stuff. Like I played around with it. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just basically the point is they're never going to make more atoms. I mean, they're never going to make more land. And so, diversify, get a little bit of income there too, is my mindset.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's a good point. Land isn't going anywhere, and people's need for housing isn't either. So it's definitely good to balance out the risk that way, I think. So very cool. I guess we'll close with this. You mentioned audience and Twitter. For those that don't know, you've gone from, I guess, basically zero to over 10,000 followers in less than a year. I'm curious if you could share maybe 1 or 2 pieces of advice with the audience for people that are maybe looking to build the following on Twitter or somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, thank you for pointing that out. I think basically, I started writing online. I started my online journey like February, March of last year. Most of the stuff I published was to crickets. I mean, I wrote articles trying to help people, and no one read it. And so this journey of putting yourself out there and building an audience is a long game. It's a game of reps. It's a game of getting lucky. But you can't get lucky if you don't buy the lotto ticket. And so there's no chance you're ever going to win the lotto if you don't buy the lotto ticket. And so I think where a lot of people kind of a lot of people give up because you publish for a month or two and you see no results and you're like, this is useless. So you kind of got to have this faith that at some point you can use that to make some money or to do something. And for me, I kind of had that faith because I saw these other people and I saw that they were able to make money and they were able to do things with that. And I felt like, you know what? It doesn't cost me a whole lot to tweet every day. It doesn't, I'm going to put these reps in. I'm going to write these articles. I enjoy writing the articles anyway. And I enjoy becoming better at writing. And so I did all of that. And probably right up until August, I had, just so you understand, I mean, before last year, I tweeted maybe 10 times in a decade. And I wrote maybe 10 articles in a decade. And
Yep.
last year I wrote like 100 essays and I tweeted like thousands of times. And so my point is like, it's a lot of reps and I just put them all in last year over and over. And eventually right around, I say September, October. And then after I took small bets, a lot of this stuff started clicking for me. It started coming together. And it's just these ideas that I got better I got more comfortable at just being myself out there. At first, I was awkward, too intense, to maybe sounded a little crazy to people. And then eventually, I got a lot more comfortable, and also I became more attuned to what people want from me. Like it was obvious the signals were there, like people were liking certain tweets. Like that means they want to hear more about that. They were engaging on certain things. They were asking me certain questions. And so I just sort of doubled down on that. I mean, Daniel Vassallo helped a lot. Obviously, he has a whole course on how to grow on Twitter. I rewatched that right around the time that, because I had watched it a long time ago, but I took no action.
Right.
And I rewatched that. And I just applied all those principles of like giving freely. Like even my course on timeless career advice for software engineers, I mean, a lot of that stuff I put out in tweets already. But the truth is, most people don't have the time to go sift through thousands. I mean, I put out thousands of tweets. Who's going to go through all of that and try to piecemeal, all my advice? So it's much better. They'll pay me $15 for this course, and it's all like put together. So it's just this weird concept. Like you think you're giving your stuff away, you think you're doing this, and you think like you won't be able to make money from it later. But it turns out that you actually can, because no one has the time. They want it concise. No one has the time to sift through all of that. And so basically, once I started recognizing that, I just started giving away everything I know. And I said, screw it. I'm going to help people as much as I can in that process, even if they don't buy my course or they don't use my app. At least they'll like me as a human being because I helped them in some way. And that was my mindset.
Great. Yeah, I think that's something Daniel talks about as well. But just, freely giving, kind of building trust and goodwill with an audience is so key. And also having that long-term mindset, like you said, nothing's going to happen overnight, especially on social media. So that's great stuff. Louie, thanks so much for being with us today. I wanted to give you an opportunity to just say any last things to the audience and maybe tell us where to find you before we wrap up.
Yeah, no, thank you, Peter. This was actually awesome. I don't usually get to talk about so many random topics. Usually people want to hear one thing from me. So I'm really grateful you had me on. And basically I'm on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. It's at LBACAJ. That's my last name. So first letter of my first name and my last name. That's my Twitter handle. And I mean, follow me on there. I'm happy to help you in any way I can. You can DM me. You can you can even email me. I have a website, louiebacaj.com, where I write essays, what's top of mind. And I also have a newsletter on there that I write regularly. But basically, Twitter is the place.
Sounds great. Yeah, you're definitely crushing it over there. So go follow Louie. And Louie, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Develop Yourself podcast. Quick plug for Aaron. You can find out more about his online coding bootcamp Parsity at parsity.io. That's parsity.io. Also, Aaron runs a free 30-day cohort-based JavaScript course called Dev30 that teaches you how to work on your skills, habits, network, and mindset in order to start on the journey of becoming a developer. Find out more about Dev30 at dev30.xyz. That's dev30.xyz. And a quick note, the next cohort starts on April 25th, so go ahead and apply if you're interested. And this is going to be the last cohort that is offered for free, so go ahead and take advantage of that. Also, you can find my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Peter Elbaum if you're interested on videos about software engineering and self-employment. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the next one.